Well, thank you, Elizabeth and Bettina, for the introduction. Thanks you for who joined the webinar, for connecting this morning. Let me thank also my colleague Camille, who along with me has worked on preparing this note incessantly over the last months. The general background, or the context, if you want, that we had in mind while working on this note was that of the care strategy, and specifically of the Council recommendation that was introduced last December on the revision of the Barcelona targets. As you will certainly know, the new targets for 2030 call for member states to raise participation levels to 45% of children under the age of 3 and to 96% for children between the ages of 3 and compulsory primary education. Slightly different targets are applied for member states who did not reach the prior Barcelona targets of 2022, but that's another story. The main novelty of the recommendation from last December, however, along with the renewed targets, is that the document invites member states to look beyond the mere availability of ECEC, even of EC with full-time, and calls explicitly for governments to pay attention to the dimension of accessibility, affordability, and crucially for our purpose of quality. The document doesn't stop here. It proceeds to give a description, an interesting description of what it calls the essence of the concept of quality ECEC, which it identifies in the quality of the interactions between adults and children in playgroups and classrooms. The recommendation continues drawing from the 2019 recommendation on high-quality ECEC systems, and which in turn looked back to the 2014 proposal for a European quality framework on ECEC, and frames quality as this multi-dimensional concept that consists not only of the very mentioned valuable, meaningful experience of care and learning that children have in playgroups, but also of a number of further, would say, like enabling elements that make possible those valuable interactions between adults and children to begin with. The recommendation in this sense points to a number of what's called, I would call them like crucial areas of improvement, where policy interventions are known to be effective and enable these quality interactions, and then proceeds to mention specifically the child-staff ratio as one variable of particular importance. And let's say here is where I may depart or leave the recommendation and pass to briefly like sum up the argument that we put forward in our note. Well, the child-staff ratio, like we did not discover it today with the note, and neither did the recommendation of December 2022. It is a variable that is being around for a long time, has long been seen as forming part of an iron triangle of structural elements which bear a direct impact on the quality of education and caring processes in informal settings. In the context of this note, we use child-staff ratio to refer to the number of children per skilled practitioner that is actively engaged in regular educational pedagogical activities in playgroups and classrooms. So like the number of children per skilled, qualified, adequately qualified practitioner that is engaged in regular educational pedagogical activities in playgroups and classrooms. So why is it relevant? The argument that we put forward in the note is that there is a direct relation between how many children a practitioner is responsible for supervising in a playgroup and the quality of the experiences that children will have over the course of their stay in the creche, in daycare nursery, in the kindergarten. Why? Because child staff ratios have a significant impact on the organization and on the performance of caring and educational practices by staff, and ultimately shape the condition, mediate the strength and the form of the interactions between staff and children that take place in playgroups. In the note, we identify and briefly discuss three, let's say, constituent dimensions of these quality interactions. Discuss the importance of relationships between staff and children that are sensitive and warm and responsive relationships, in the sense that of sustained, meaningful interaction, not one-off, sustained over time. We discuss the importance of educational and caring practices that are adapted and responsive and contextualized, like responsive to the specific unique needs of the child, and particularly of children that face circumstances of disadvantage. And third, we discuss briefly the importance of building the educational alliances with families, like strong partnerships between ECEC settings and parents. The idea is that the number of children per qualified staff, per qualified practitioner, in formal settings bear influence on the likelihood that these three elements are realized. In the first place, talking about the first one, well, it is argued that child staff ratios, like better child staff ratios, less children per qualified staff, on average improve the experience of children by making the interactions between them and staff warmer and more engaging. The argument is quite intuitive, holds that like a skilled practitioner well supported by a competent ECEC environment with fewer children under his or her responsibility would be better placed, better equipped to engage each of them consistently with sensitive interactions, to be responsive to their needs, support their learning, for instance, by performing scaffolding functions, blah, blah. Furthermore, like a lower number of children per adult makes it easier for staff to take full advantage of, let's say, like routine caregiving situations. Think of like the changing of the diaper in a nursery. This caregiving situations that are particularly relevant for very young kids, because those are moments where elements of care, language exchange, discovery come together in a single moment of one-to-one education and care interaction. They're moments of really deep interaction. They're extremely significant, that need to be taken advantage of, but that's only possible if staff has the flexibility to dedicate time to these moments. In this sense, a third crucial aspect relates to the fact that better child staff ratios improve the working conditions of staff. And we know that child-adult interactions grow warmer and more responsive and more meaningful when they evolve and extend over long stretches of time. And in this regard, child staff ratios impact positively on the working condition of practitioners, making turnover less likely, less frequent, and therefore contributing to create the precondition for stable relationships. Like the second dimension insists on the importance of warmth in the interactions, but highlights the effect of better ratio on the experiences of children in conditions of disadvantage. The argument here goes that children in disadvantaged conditions draw the greatest benefit from the fact that, let's say, a daycare facility has sufficient staff to engage them systematically in warm, responsive, possibly one-to-one interaction, but also, crucially, that these moments of meaningful, open interactions are both the result and enable a targeted attention by staff to develop activities and plan experiences that are tailored to the specific needs of these children. Better child-staff ratios, in the sense, allow for more time to be dedicated to planning, especially when they are developed in conjunction with training guidelines that emphasize the importance of planning and collective work, and the importance of working with families to develop well-adjusted, tailored educational practices, which takes me to the third and final element of our triad, which is the importance of building strong partnerships between ECEC facilities, settings, and families. The better child-staff ratios, in this sense, are seen as conducive to a greater flexibility, and allows caregivers more time to exchange information with parents during those crucial daily drop-off and pick-up moments of exchange that are of enormous significance, particularly during phases of transition and of the difficulties of the child. But also, better ratios can impact significantly on the quality of the information that is being reported back to families. As mentioned before, better ratios mean more time for observations, for meaningful interactions, and those for more thoughtful and detailed reporting back to parents. Why is this significant? Well, it's significant because we know that the quality of the relationship between staff and families bear a direct influence on the openness of the relationship between child and educators. So in other words, if the family has a good relationship with the educational center, there is more confidence in leaving the child at the daycare. There better communication between parents and staff that will generate common strategies, consistency of pedagogical approaches in daycare and in a home care environment, and daily transitions between home and school become less hard and traumatic. So to wrap up very quickly, we believe we are at a particular moment in time in EU in relationship to the ECEC sector. We're a moment in time where, on one side, the demand for quality services, for accessible, affordable, and high-quality service has never been higher and almost universally exceeds the supply. The 2022 recommendation on the revision of the targets looks at this situation and calls for a significant increase in provision because of this situation. On the other, we face financial constraints. And we know that raising the quality of provision, or even maintaining, for that matter, the quality unaltered, while on the other hand, expanding the offer of places entails a very significant financial and political commitment. And there is a risk here that we identify, that we observe, and the risk is that national or regional or municipal authorities, for that matter, faced by this dilemma, may decide to prioritize expansion of places over enforcement of quality standards. In other words, they may decide to trade quality for quantity, and this would be extremely counterproductive, we argue, because we know that ECEC is beneficial developmental perspective only as long as it is of a high quality, and ECEC of a poor quality does not represent an interesting, attractive reconciliation solution for family, moreover. In this context, COFACE, we've identified 2 or 3 elements that we believe are the utmost importance to avoid that the goals of raising participation and quality become mutually excludent and are pitched one against the other. I'm finished. I'm already over my 15 minutes. The first is that national and regional authorities should develop quality guidelines that apply to both segments of the ECEC system, 03 and 36. And these guidelines include binding minimum quality standards for provision. The second is that these guidelines acknowledge the complexity of ECEC settings and the fact that they involve many different professional roles, but that child staff ratios should refer exclusively to qualified staff engaged in regular educational activities, so not management and staff engaged in other activities, non-educational activities. Child staff ratio should only touch or regard staffing actively engaged in regular education activities. Thirdly, finally, the reflection on the importance to differentiate between educational activities on one hand and non-educational activities is crucial. Specifically, a clarification about where and in what context the ratios should be applied can lead the way to a broader reflection on the organization and regulation of childcare settings in a way that not only recognizes and places focus on the importance of well-staffed hours of care and educational activities in playgroups, but also by extension highlights the value of complementary activities that are performed outside the playgroup, such as the crucial importance of reflexive observation of children's unique needs, collegial reflection and planning of tailored activities, and the development through targeted moment of counseling, and outside the classroom, the development of horizontal strategic alliances with parents and guardians based on horizontal collaboration, mutual respect, and listening. And that's it. Thanks a lot for the attention.
Yes, thanks a lot. I will start by introduce myself first, although Elizabeth did already. I work at EASPD, which is the European Association of Service Providers for Persons with Disabilities, a very long acronym for a big network providing social support to children with disabilities and adults with disabilities. And I do work on education and childhood, so services to families too. I mean, what I heard here is very familiar to what we stand for, and we absolutely agree and support the message. We believe that, I mean, it's a matter of fact that ECEC is about giving the opportunity to children to learn, develop, and develop their well-being. And it's also their first experience with a group of peers, which is on the one hand for, I mean, all the children, it is an opportunity to learn social skills, interaction, and it is a very, very important opportunity for those children that come from disadvantaged backgrounds and for children with disabilities that we focus on. I will go back there. But my second thought when reading and listening to the presentation was that we are facing similar issues with the social sector, meaning that there is, I mean, the staff, the quality of the staff, the number of the staff makes a difference in the quality of the support and of the results. The working conditions are also a key issue, so it's very important to improve the working conditions for the staff, both of the social services and working in nurseries and kindergartens. And the training and the qualification and the skills, of course, make a difference as well. And in particular, when looking at the inclusion of children with disabilities, it's very important to have this as a part of the curricula for all the staff involved in ECEC, not only of the teachers, but of everyone. And another key point that I heard and I read here, and we are also pushing for, is the attractiveness of the sector. So it's also a matter of making this work valued by society, both in terms of economic reward, but also in terms of realizing that taking care of children in this particular age is really building the basis of our future. So, so what is true for ECEC is true for social services, and this is done, and this was said as well, through investment. So we need, there is need for money in the right things, and also of policy prioritization, which we saw for what concerns ECEC from the last initiatives of the Commission, that we have to say. And it's also positive that there was not only a stress on numbers, but also a stress on the inclusiveness, although there are some step forwards that could be done. Looking at, I mean, we were thinking of what we would like, what we would need. Let's come back to the reality. So on the one hand, inclusion is not a reality yet. So children with disabilities, in particular, can be excluded from ECEC despite the recommendations. The ratio between staff and children is often high. It can be from 16 to 20 children per teacher, at least according to OECD research. So, I mean, there is really need for more efforts in this sense. It is, of course, when you have a higher staff-child ratio, then there are consequences in stress, in the quality of the support that can be provided. For what concerns children with disabilities, it's also important to think of support teachers to be there in the class, potentially for the whole class, and in particular for the child with a disability. And it's very important to work with the parents, but it's also very important to work with those services that support the child, and this is also where we have been pushing a lot. So we have we could read a lot, for example, from the Commission, and also in this paper about the inclusion of children with disabilities. But there is a precondition. There are services that support their families, so early childhood intervention services that start from 0 until 6, depending on when the risk of delay is detected, that should work in close collaboration with teachers and parents. And when it's very important when pushing for policies that are inclusive to take these two together when we talk about early childhood. So looking at ECEC, but looking also at what makes ECEC possible, because early childhood intervention, that for those who are not familiar, is all the support that goes to the families that have children that risk a developmental delay. And they are nowadays structured often as therapies with a very medical approach. What we are trying to push for, what contemporary ECI is for, is another approach which is social, it's based on strength, is based on the partnership with families, and it's also moving the place where the activities happen. So it's about training the parents, training the teachers for them to help the child reaching their full potential. So it's very important to start to invest on that, because this is about preventing the segregation. Also because in some countries, I was in Greece last week, and some kindergartens just don't accept children with a disability when the disability is too strong. And the same goes for Belgium. So having ECI means also having the possibility in some countries to have the access to ECEC. Of course, we want to move forward in general and to apply the UNCRPD, which the EU signed, and having laws that make ECEC open for all. but this requires investment and clear cut. I would close just to referring to a project we are doing, which is called Embrace. So we will have our conference at the end of the year, and it's about providing tools for teachers to include children with intellectual disability in ECEC. So we developed a collection of good practices, a report that highlights many of the things that you highlighted too. So there is a lack of training in many cases, and also the child staff ratio is really a very important element for quality. We also have an e-learning course and some awareness raising. So I would inform you and share the tools when they will be finalized with you. And also on family-centered ECI, we will have another conference in June where also COFACE will be part of the speakers.
Thank you, Irene. I'll now give the floor to Tuscany.
Yeah, thanks, Bettina, and good morning, everyone. As Elizabeth said, my name is Tuscany Bell, and I'm responsible for the social services sector at EPSU, which is the European Trade Union Federation representing workers in the social services sector. So we represent early childhood education and care workers from across the pan-European region in private, public, and non-profit services. And I'm very happy to be here this morning for this important exchange. And thank you, Martino, for your presentation and for the concept note, which raises many crucial issues. I also fully agree with everything you've said. And to deliver on Principle 11 of the European Pillar of Social Rights on the right to ECEC, we need to look beyond the number of children in early childhood education and care and think about the quality of education and care. And this is where the child to staff ratios play such an important role. And the huge kind of positive impact of low child to staff ratios on the development and on the well-being of children has been very well explained by the previous speakers. So I won't repeat there. I'll just say a few words on the workforce angle. So why staffing levels are so low and kind of explore that side of it. I think one of the big reasons behind low staffing levels is the undervaluation of the work. A big thing in many countries is that people have this perception of early childhood education and care as low skilled and babysitting almost. So the very complex educational, developmental, psychological support role of early childhood education and care in a child's life is played down. And this is why professionalization of ECEC is such a big topic for us. So creating more recognition of the skills of ECEC staff and the role that they play, and creating more pathways for career development. The undervaluation of the profession is linked to underfunding, lack of investment, and also often privatization. In many parts of Europe, there's limited access to quality public early childhood education and care services. And this is because policymakers don't see the need to invest in ECEC in the same way as they do to invest in education, despite the fact that so much of a child's development happens in these early years, again, as has been well explained. So underinvestment means that in some cases, staff levels are purposely kept low because the need to improve staff-child ratios is not prioritized. But in other cases, it also means that underinvestment keeps wages low. And so then even if you do want to hire more staff, it's difficult because the sector is just not attractive. And as I said before, professionalization is important, but greater recognition also needs to go hand in hand with higher wages. In addition to the low salaries, another aspect of the job which makes it hard to attract well-qualified workers is the prevalence of precarious contracts. Part-time contracts are especially common in ECEC, and while some ECEC staff do want to work part-time, many aren't given the choice, even if they want to work full-time. There are a lot of fixed-term contracts, and in some cases we also see 0-hour contracts. And this kind of reinforces this view of ECEC as babysitting, as not something that you need to invest in the same way as education. It's also important to mention how high child to staff ratios changes the nature of the work. So when there's only one staff member for many children, they're not able to deliver on this complex emotional, developmental, educational support role. So despite the fact that this is what they're trained to do and that's what they're there to do, they're often alone with a large group of children. And then of course, their role becomes just trying to keep an eye on all the children because that's all they can do in that setting. And the impact of this on the children has been well explained, but there's also an impact on the staff because ultimately they're not able to provide the level of education and care that they want to do and that they are trained to do. And that can be very demotivating and can also lead to burnout. A final aspect that I will mention is the gender aspect. The ECEC profession is overwhelmingly dominated by women, and there are strong stereotypes as to why the work is so undervalued. There's this kind of, well, it's very outdated, but unfortunately persisting view that early childhood care is kind of a maternal instinct of all women, and this is used to almost justify the fact that it's low paid, like, you know, this is something that women should do for free. It's very sad and it's, as I say, extremely outdated, but it does persist. So I'll stop there, but to summarize the main points, I think that the key issues are professionalization of early childhood education and care, recognizing the skills and the very important role of ECEC staff in the development of the children. And this must be accompanied with higher wages. There's also a need for quality work contracts and clear career pathways in order to attract a highly skilled workforce. And all of these issues need more funding, a revaluation of the profession, and to challenge the gender stereotypes. And finally, just a final word to reiterate what I think was Martino's main message, that the accessibility and affordability of ECEC cannot come at the expense of quality working conditions and quality services. Thank you.
Thank you, Tuscany. So last but not least, I'll invite Dr. Stefan to take the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much for a very good and interesting presentation, and also the first. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes,
I can hear you fine.
Because I'm still getting this message, then I should get unmuted. So thank you for very good presentation and for two very pertinent comments. Indeed, it is a topic which is huge and can be approached from very different perspectives. So basically, there are three angles. One which I know the best, but which was not mentioned here today, which is the European Child Guarantee, which is targeted at children at risk of poverty or social exclusion. This is a large group within Europe, so almost 1 in 4 children is considered to be at risk of poverty or social exclusion, and thus in need according to the Child Guarantee recommendation. And the other perspectives are have been mentioned today. So it is the revision of Barcelona targets on provision of childcare, and also the another recommendation from a few years ago. Actually, it's going to be 4th anniversary in a few days of the recommendation on high quality early childhood education and care systems, which I believe is the most pertinent to the topic of today. And there are clearly each of those initiatives comes from different perspectives. So Child Guarantee is about social inclusion, about children from families on low income. The Barcelona targets are mostly about facilitating labor market participation of women. This is how they originated 20 years ago, and it is still very visible in the preamble or the recitals of the recommendation. And then the quality looks basically on how early childhood education and care is delivered. What they have in common is that all of them are council recommendations. So they show a way for the member states and what should be done. but it's unlike in other areas of policy making in the EU, it's not obligatory. So the member states are free to implement, and they also can plan themselves how they're going to implement it. So this is best visible in European Child Guarantee, where we explicitly asked for action plans to be delivered. The deadline was more than a year ago, and still 6 plans are missing, and one is has been submitted but needs to be corrected. So this is about this is one aspect of how challenging it is. The other aspect is that Martino mentioned in his presentation that it's all about relationships, and those relationships should be warm, sensitive, and receptive. This is very true, but it's also very difficult to imagine, even imagine, not to say establish and implement a quality framework which will check the warmth and receptiveness of each person working in a early childhood education and care facility. This is something which is very individual. We can imagine good training, but then those are very interpersonal elements which are actually, I would say, quite difficult to train. And also there are clear trade-offs. So if we, like in the recommendation on revised Barcelona targets, if we put stress on the number of children who have access and the percentage of children who have who participate in early childhood education and care, then it's not unlikely that the staff-child ratio are going to worsen because the member states and regional authorities will want to increase the share of children, and facilities are limited. Money is limited, as Tuscany has said, so there might be a trade-off. And then obviously there is also an issue of prioritizing and general policy making, because while we have clear evidence that children from disadvantaged backgrounds benefit the most from childcare, then we want the member states to provide this childcare for free and finance from public money. Then there is a question how you're going to convince citizens that this is something they should pay for in their taxes. We do have money in the European Social Fund Plus to support implementation of Child Guarantee. And the good news here is that all action plans have at least something on provision of early childhood education and care. But besides this ESF Plus money, some resources from national sources will be necessary. So we still have plenty of time ahead of us, so I can put all this on the table here, and I look forward to discussion.